This is the Global Mom Show, episode 25. Hi, I'm Grace Otis. I'm a wife, a mom of 3 boys, a former expat and development worker, and a freelance writer for nonprofits and businesses. I've lived in Germany and India, and I've traveled lots of places besides that. But now I make my home in the U.S., where one of my goals is to stay connected with a global view of life. This is the show that connects you with moms around the world who want to live globally minded lives wherever they are and teach their kids to do the same. Hi, everyone. In case you didn't know it, from September 15th through October 15th was Hispanic Heritage Month. We didn't do anything on the podcast yet for that, so today we're going to talk a little bit about that and about Day of the Dead, which is coming up in just a couple of days. Today, my guest is Monica Olivera. She is a homeschooling mother of 2 and a freelance education writer. Her site, mommymaestra.com, helps Hispanic parents get more involved in their children's education by providing resources, tips, and opportunities. She's also the co-founder of Latinas for Latino Lit and the content creator of the Latino Children's Summer Reading Program, the first national online program designed specifically for Latino families. Her education articles have appeared in numerous online sites such as NBC News, LatinoMom.me, and PBS Parents. Welcome to the show, Monica.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Tell me a little bit about yourself and your family.
Okay, so I'm a Spanish-Mexican American Latina. I'm a mother of 2. As you mentioned earlier, I homeschool both of them, and I also am a freelance education writer. We moved to North Carolina from Texas about 10 years ago for my husband's job. And we currently live in a rural community where we have, we're limited as far as educational choices go. And as I mentioned, we have 2 children that are ages 10 and 12.
Okay. What is your multicultural story? You said you're Mexican, American, and Spanish. Tell us about that and your background.
Correct. Yeah. So my father and his side of the family are from Spain, and my mother is Mexican American. They met when my mom went to Spain while studying for her master's degree, and they got married. But I was born in Texas, and I grew up there, and spent occasional summers in Spain with my dad and family.
And how did being a Latina impact you growing up?
I would say that my childhood, I was immersed in the Latino culture growing up. So I had a childhood that was really rich in the Latino culture and traditions. We celebrated the real Cinco de Mayo. We frequently participated in Las Posadas, the 16th of September, and other holidays and traditions. But I attended mostly all-white private school, and typically I was the only Latina in my class. So in a way, it was like I kind of walked in 2 worlds. But eventually, my mom and I wound up moving to a nearby town because I was born in Dallas, but we moved to Fort Worth for my mom's job. And despite moving that far away from the connections, I started to lose connections to my heritage. But I think that my childhood had really ingrained those experiences and feelings deeply into me, so they remained a part of me. And even though I didn't really have much opportunity to express it, pretty much after I started high school, I only had the opportunity really to experience my Hispanic heritage during the summers, which is when I would go to Spain to visit my dad and his side of the family. But I guess pretty much all that changed once I had kids, and I felt, that desperate need to recreate, if not recreate my childhood for them, to give them a connection to their Hispanic heritage that was as strong as the one that I had experienced.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said at the beginning you lived in Dallas in a primarily Mexican-American community. And did you speak Spanish growing up?
Absolutely. That was actually my first language when I was growing up. We were very close-knit family. It was my mom and my grandmother and great-grandmother all were of Hispanic heritage. My great-grandmother was actually from Mexico. And we spent a lot of time with her because my parents divorced when I was young. And my mom spent a lot of time working because she needed to support me. So I spent a lot of time with my great-grandmother. And she did not speak very much English at all. And so pretty much all communication with her was in Spanish. She was really a fantastic lady and very strong and probably one of my role models, because when she came to this country, she wound up establishing her own restaurant in Dallas, and it was very successful.
Tell us about some of the ways that you're intentionally passing on your heritage to your children, since you don't have that family network that you had growing up.
So I think one of the most important thing any parent can do is openly celebrate their heritage. I just want to make that clear. After my kids were born, as I mentioned, I began to really actively seek out like bilingual books that reflected my heritage, and I'd read them every day. Now that we live in North Carolina, very far from my family, teaching my kids about our heritage kind of became a very conscious act. So I had to put forth the effort to find resources to expose them to the richness of our culture. So that might be through activities, books, arts and crafts, or even cooking. And of course, the language is another important part. I think really and truly the greatest way I pass on my heritage is through storytelling. Mm-hmm. So my kids love, and I think all kids are this way. They love to hear stories about their parents when their parents were young. So I definitely, there's a lot of storytelling that happens in our family. So my kids know about, for example, my great-grandmother, who has long since passed away. And they know her very well just based on the stories that either I've told them or my mom's told them. And they know a lot about our family and our heritage as a result of that. But as I said, I also look for resources and materials, be it books or activities or even TV shows that discuss the traditions of our, in our heritage, the holidays. And we are active about participating and doing those activities to increase our learning and our knowledge about.
Now, I read on your blog that you recently visited Spain for the first time in about 11 years. I'm not sure how recent that is now, but can you tell us about that trip and what it meant for you to get to share that with your children?
Yeah, actually, we just went there last month, so that was very recent for us. The last time I was in Spain, it was 11 years ago. And I was pregnant with my youngest child. So my daughter, I guess she was about 18 months or so at the time. And of course, she absolutely remembers nothing of that trip. So it was really important for me to go. My dad, who lives in Spain, had never even met my son. We talked a lot via Facebook, and he saw pictures and things like that, but it's just not the same, obviously. So of course, this trip was just really important to me. I wanted my kids, who are now at an age where they will remember these experiences, to actually meet their family and learn all about that side of their heritage. And, in my opinion, a person needs to know where they come from because they need to be proud of their heritage. I think, I know that studies show that kids who grow up proud of their heritage are more likely to be successful in life and have better social, emotional skills. And so I really wanted them to have the opportunity to meet the family that they didn't know and to be able to learn and, experience firsthand and appreciate that part of their heritage and part of what makes them as well.
How do you feel like your kids connected with the culture when you were there? Did they see it as observers, or did they really connect with the people and your family and the culture as if it were their own?
I think the biggest difference was the fact that they were meeting family, and I think that really helped to make the experience very personal for them, and it helped to help them find the connection that they need in order to experience it, not like a tourist, but as someone who is actually in some way related to that whole culture. And, it's really hard not to love someone or something that seems to love you so much. And I think they just had such a good time with my family, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my dad, their uncle. I have a brother that's over there. And I just think that they really were able to find that connection that I wanted them to have. And they probably would not have found that, or maybe they would have. I don't know. But when they were younger, I think now they're old enough to really appreciate the fact that someone wants so badly to teach them about their culture. My dad was very big on showing them everything about his town and his lifestyle and the culture, because he just really wants them to be as proud of it and feel that connection so that they'll want to go back. And I think that they did. I think that was very helpful for them.
How did your kids do with the language? Have you been teaching them bilingually in your own home?
Yeah, so our bilingual journey has been very much a struggle. Part of that is because, growing up, I spoke Spanish a lot as a kid, but then once I hit high school, it kind of went to a dead stop because we moved away from family. And as I mentioned, I attended pretty much all white schools where I was frequently the only Latina in the class. So there wasn't much of an opportunity to speak Spanish. And afterwards I went to college, and from there I went on to a work environment. And the Spanish was really no longer my dominant language. But fortunately, since having children, it was an important issue for me so that they would learn Spanish, but we have definitely struggled to find the right way to do that, especially since right where we live, there's really no other Latinos in this area. So really the only person who speaks Spanish where we live now is me. I think there's maybe a few people I see or I know of, but they're not someone that I come into constant contact with them. So what I've done is I've taken advantage of our homeschool situation and really explored different curricula. I think the one that's working the best for us right at this exact moment, a lot of it has to do with their age, is Rosetta Stone. And it's a completely it's an immersion curriculum. So they have to learn it naturally like they would learn any other language. And I really like that about that curriculum. But we have used, several other curricula as well. As they were growing up, and to begin with, when they were first born, I used to spend a lot of time reading, Spanish children's books to them or bilingual books to them so that they would develop, the ear that they need to hear it, but as well as pronounce it. So it's been a challenge, but, I'm finally feeling confident. I would not say that they are in any way, fully fluent in Spanish, but they have definitely improved dramatically. And, I see it most with my daughter, who's probably the one who's most excited about learning Spanish. And especially now that we've been to Spain, she's ready to go back next summer on her own.
Right.
If I let her.
That makes a big difference to be able to speak it with friends and relatives.
Absolutely.
September 15th to October 15th is called Hispanic Heritage Month. And can you tell us about how you celebrate that month in your own home? Have you celebrated it in the past? I'm not even sure how long this designation has been around.
Sure. It's been around for quite a while now, but really for us, Hispanic Heritage Month is every month. So we study about the contributions that the Hispanics have had on the U.S. and world history throughout the year. Part of it is part of our homeschool history, and sometimes just for fun, especially like during the summer months. So we incorporate a lot of Latino children's literature as well. During Hispanic Heritage Month, since there is a greater focus in our communities, we usually take advantage of special programming, for example, on PBS, or new exhibits that might be at our museums, or even different events or websites that pop up online. And of course, I take advantage of homeschooling to use materials that I've created to help my kids learn more. And then I sometimes share those materials with other families.
For those listening who might need a refresher in terms, Monica, can you just explain briefly the different terms, Hispanic, Latino, Latina?
Well, there's still a lot of debate about that. But essentially, even among Hispanics and Latinos, and, there's a lot of different ways that people identify with different terms.
Right.
So I'm not going to say anything is correct, but I will say that typically Hispanic usually refers to a person or a thing of Spanish-speaking descent or Spanish-speaking origin. So this would include Spain, obviously. Whereas Latino and Latina, usually refers to a person of Latin American heritage. But again, there's so much diversity within our culture, especially Latin America, that, I'm always careful about saying one term is right or wrong.
Blanket statements.
Like
yep.
Sure.
And there's kind of for people in the United States, it's easier for sometimes, instead of trying to recognize all the different cultures, just say, oh, it's just one thing, when it's not just one thing. It's many different countries, many different cultures, many different ethnicities within those cultures and races and all of that. So I think that's interesting, the naming process that people go through, but that's a whole nother conversation.
It is. And actually, that's something that happens a lot with, in terms of literature, children's literature. We still continue to struggle to this day to find literature that is produced by a Latino author. And the fact remains that a lot of publishing houses say, well, they used to say that's because Latinos don't read, but we know that's not true because I personally have sold, we had a state fair booth one year and I was selling Latino children's literature, bilingual books for children. And the families that came through were so excited to find them. They just couldn't believe that they didn't know about them and they were happy to purchase them. But I think the struggle for a lot of companies is the fact that they can't just market one book that appeals to all Latinos. And that's because you can't write a book just about, let's say, Mexican traditions and expect all Hispanics to either understand it or relate to it, just like you couldn't do that for a book about Cuba or Puerto Rico or Chile. There's so much variation within our own culture.
Mm-hmm. So now I'm going to ask you something that I'm sure that it's going to be difficult to answer because I'm going to ask for some of your favorite children's books.
Okay.
For kids lit, for bilingual books or Hispanic culture or Latino culture books. What are some of your go-to resources that you start parents out with?
So that's actually easy for me because we spend so much time looking through Latino children's literature. I would say that if you're looking for something that represents the diversity of our culture, there's a couple of books that I would recommend right away. The first one would be Yes, We Are Latinos. That's by Alma Florida. And it teaches about the diversity within our culture. It's essentially stories about children from different Latin American cultures or different backgrounds. I really love that book because it portrays, I think, Hispanic families more accurately, especially the experiences that children have. So that's my number one book. It would be more geared, though, for older children, someone who's like 10 and older. Just because it's not really a picture book, it's more of a storybook. For younger children, there is a wonderful book called Mama Goose, a Latino nursery treasury. And that also is by Alma Florida and Isabel Campoy. And that one is really a collection of songs and nursery rhymes and riddles and things from all over Latin America. And so there's something that I think everyone can find and relate to. And a lot of those nursery rhymes are just something that pretty much every Latino family has heard at some point. A Latino person has probably heard if they've been raised in a way that really is connected to their heritage. So things like Los Pollitos Dicen, which is a little nursery rhyme, those will all be found inside this wonderful book. It is no longer being published, but you can still find wonderful copies online. I'm pretty sure Amazon carries gently used copies. So I would highly recommend that you get that if you're interested. Of course, you can always look for biographies on figures like Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta, Celia Cruz, for example. The two authors that come to my mind that write really excellent biographies for children would be Monica Brown and Margarita Engel. They have some excellent biographies for kids. You might also learn about Playing Loteria, which is sort of like a Latin American version of bingo, or maybe about Raton Perez, who is the Spanish version of the Tooth Fairy. And Renee Colato Lainez is an author who has some wonderful picture books on both of these topics.
And so those books they teach culture, language at the same time.
Yeah, most of the books are bilingual. Some of them have full text in English and full text in Spanish. Some are in English with a spattering of Spanish words mixed in.
Now, Day of the Dead is right around the corner. Can you explain to us what that celebration is? And did you grow up celebrating it? What are the origins? And I'll ask you more questions as you get to talking about it, because I really know very little about this holiday.
Okay, so Day of the Dead is basically a holiday that is mostly, I think, or most well known, is celebrated in the rural areas of Mexico. And it coincides with All Saints Day, and it's basically a celebration where people are allowed to remember their loved ones who have passed away. It's really such a beautiful celebration. It's so misunderstood, however, because I think most people look at it or see some of the symbols that are used in it and think it's like gruesome or like some sort of morbid way of celebrating the dead or something like that, but it's not. In Mexico, it's mostly celebrated in rural areas or countryside towns and villages. It started out by mostly with indigenous people. But each of the towns or regions may celebrate the day in a slightly different way. So, for example, some towns may celebrate the day by going to the cemetery and preparing a feast at the gravesite of a relative. Or that a lot of what you see now, especially those who celebrate it here in the United States, specifically in the southwestern United States, is they build like a little display. It's called, most people call it an ofrenda, and it's a way of celebrating the people who have passed away. So your ofrenda would be carefully decorated, and it would be covered in gifts, but probably the most important thing would be a picture of your loved one who's passed away. Mm-hmm. So, for example, whenever I create one here at home, the kids and I, we put a picture of my grandfather who's passed away. We put a picture of my great-grandmother who's also gone. And anyone that we remember who may no longer be with us, but people we've loved, we put their frame on the ofrenda, and then you can decorate it with foods or items that person is known for, like things they like to eat or things they like to do. For example, my great-grandmother loved cooking, and I would put like a rolling pin on there. Or there's a special tool that they use for mixing chocolate, hot chocolate. So I would put that on.
Now the ofrenda, I've heard that referred to as an altar, but an altar to me symbolizes worship. So is it actually like a worshiping of the elders, or is it more of just a celebration of them?
Yeah, I don't even like to use the word altar because I think there's the first thing that comes to mind is that you're worshiping that person, and that is not at all what people are doing. I mean, it's an opportunity for us to remember those people who have passed away. And you think about it, it's a really lovely for some people. It's a wonderful way to move through the stages of grief. Because, here in the United States, we don't have a very good grief coping system. When someone dies, there's some people do well, but some people hang on for a really long time and are not really able to move past the loss. Whereas this celebration is an opportunity for families to move past the loss their loss into an area of happiness and to celebrate their life. So, for example, one of the things that is used to decorate the ofrenda is it's called a calavera. And the calavera is like a little sugar skull. And for Mexicans, that calavera is a skull is not scary. Okay. It's supposed to be a way to make fun of death, because we all are going to die at some point. So it's a way for us to poke fun at death. And the calaveras are very beautifully decorated. So they might have all sorts of designs, colorful designs on them. And those are, they're supposed to represent the beauty of the life that was lived. So when you put all these decorations, and I think that's one of the things we see a lot today, is people will use face paint to draw a calavera on their face. And some people think, that's just kind of like making death attractive or something like that in some way. And that's not the original intent. The point of it is to show that all of us are mortal and that death is coming to all of us, but we can appreciate the beauty of that life while it was here on earth. So that's really the point of Dia de los Muertos, but it's frequently misunderstood because people don't bother to research what the symbolism is.
Mm-hmm. And then, so is it traditional to do the face painting, or is that something that you've seen more now in the U.S.?
Yeah, that's mostly a U.S. thing. I don't think that a lot of Mexicans go and dress up their faces like that, but I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, especially now in modern times, but I think originally the way it was meant, it was people would go to the graveyards and they would decorate the gravestones, or in the cemeteries, they would go and they would decorate that really beautiful with flowers and candles and a picture of their loved one. And it's just an opportunity for them to remember. So the face painting, I think now has been more embraced by U.S. customs. And I think a lot of that stems from the fact that it happens so close to Halloween. So people think, oh, well, we're going to dress up and do it this way.
I mean, it's similar to Memorial Day in some ways, except for without the military side of it. But you're paying homage to people who have passed.
Right. And you think about it, I mean, really, it's a wonderful opportunity because once someone has passed away, how often do we think about them and remember their influence on our life and their contributions? And that's why I just think it's such a beautiful holiday, because it makes us take the time to slow down, especially here in the States where we're always rush and very busy. This forces us to stop and slow down and think about those people that we loved and had such a wonderful influence on our life. And it's a way for us to, I don't want to say to show them, but maybe it's to show ourselves that we haven't forgotten them.
Mm-hmm. And just to remember their story. Now, is this a religious holiday at all?
If memory serves me correctly, I believe it was started by Jesuit priests, but it wasn't a Catholic tradition. It was started as a way to maybe convert some of the indigenous people that lived in that area. Sometimes it's hard to say because it's hard to separate religion from your daily life.
I mean, it's similar to All Saints' Day in some ways. Yeah. That's also around that time period. So I'm sure there's some connection there that we probably need to delve deeper into to fully understand, because Halloween, All Saints Day, Reformation Day, it's all combined there together, and they're all different traditions. One question I have for you is, how do you feel as a Latina about this fact that people in America are now celebrating Day of the Dead who don't know anything about it and might be grabbing some of the traditions here and leaving other ones away? How do you feel about that?
Well, that's a good question about cultural appropriation. I've been hearing that a lot lately. And really, personally, I think that it's important to understand other cultures. And I don't think there's anything wrong with participating in a celebration, but I do think it's very important. Like if it's not your culture, I think it's very important for you to understand the whys of it. Why do they celebrate it this way? And it's important to understand where they're coming from, because otherwise you're just, I don't want to say you're totally getting it wrong, but you're kind of missing the point, So while it's important to appreciate the beauties of other cultures, it's important. There's so much symbolism that's involved in lots of traditions from around the world, not just Day of the Dead. But if you're going to participate in another tradition or another holiday, you might as well find out what is the intention of that particular tradition, because I think it's important, because it helps us to understand not only that particular tradition better, but the people who created that tradition, right? And so it's a better way for us to be able to relate to and communicate effectively with people of other cultures and faiths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's just important to kind of to understand, but also not feel like you have to celebrate it fully. I mean, maybe there's a tradition or a holiday or something that I can seek to understand, but because my religious beliefs might not coincide with that holiday, I'm not going to just embrace it completely, but I'm going to try to understand what it is and what their background is. But the whole idea of cultural appropriation, where you just take the pieces that you like and throw everything else away, kind of disregards the whole cultural history and the aspect of it. And that's something I think all of us can be more aware of, as we're, like you said, with Halloween, people are now dressing up and using Day of the Dead skulls on their faces as a Halloween costume. Well, that's mixing things that don't really need to be to be mixed.
Yeah, I think some
opinion.
people find that offensive too. I think a lot of
Right.
people who participate or celebrate Day of the Dead, I know of a few people who I know have found it offensive that there is any relation between the two, simply because they feel like the traditions or the images that are associated with it are, being disrespected or misunderstood. So absolutely, I agree with you 100%.
Right. And it sounds like Day of the Dead is not really trying to celebrate ghosts or past lives or anything like that, which sometimes Halloween turns into this gruesome thing. And Day of the Dead is more about celebrating the people and celebrating the lives that they lived.
Absolutely.
Correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. That there are some people that feel, tradition has it that, those 2 days, November 1st and 2nd, is when you celebrate Day of the Dead. And some people feel like, oh, that's legend has it, let me put it that way, that's an opportunity when that's the one day of the year when the souls of the departed can come back and visit with you and to talk with you and express love and things like that. But I don't want to say that people believe that. That's just kind of the legend that goes with the holiday, because, people will set out a glass of water, for example, on the ofrenda for the thirsty traveler, or some of them feel that they follow roads of marigolds, and that's why marigold is used so much. There's a wonderful children's book. It's probably the best one about the holiday, in my opinion. It's called Rosita y Conchita, and it's by Eric Gonzalez. And it's a beautiful picture book, and it has full text in Spanish and full text in English. It's hard to find, but you can find it mostly from them. I usually order it once a year, twice a year, and I always sell out. But you can, I think they sell it on Amazon. Amazon doesn't sell it, but he sells it through Amazon. And you can go there and order it. And it's a beautiful explanation of the whole holiday, and it follows a young girl who is, essentially building her ofrenda as a tribute to her twin sister who has passed away. So it's a beautiful way that's not morbid or anything like that to explain the holiday both to adults as well as to children.
Mm-hmm. Now, are there any traditional recipes for this holiday?
I think that the dish or food that's most traditionally associated with this holiday would be pan de muerto, which is Spanish for bread of the dead. And it's essentially a type of sweet bread with a special design on top. You can actually find a recipe for making miniature pan de muerto on my website. You just have to type in pan de muerto.
Yeah, we'll connect to that in the show notes. What is your favorite word to say in Spanish?
That one's easy. I think that my favorite word in Spanish is abuelita, and that's an affectionate way of saying grandmother in Spanish.
Grandmother.
Mm-hmm. And it's what I actually called my own great grandmother, who I was very close to as a child, and I still miss her greatly.
What are some of the biggest challenges that you face today in raising a multicultural family?
For me personally, location. I don't live in a diverse area. And since we are in a mostly rural area, our access to resources like cultural centers or certain museums is pretty limited. So we have to use the internet a lot. We have to travel a lot. Actually, that's not a downside. That's a big plus, traveling. But it's also a challenge that we have. I think the other important thing too is, in addition, when you're surrounded by only one culture, it's too easy to simply be like everyone else. And so I have to constantly challenge my kids to think about things from different perspectives or do things in different ways. And I have to make a much more concerted effort to study and celebrate multiculturalism.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the things that are a joy in raising a multicultural family?
I think we have more fun. When you raise a multicultural family, the world is your playground. We have more opportunities and resources to explore. We also have more options in our daily lives, more recipes, more activities, and also there's more creativity, as well as the ability to see that there's more than one perspective to every situation. Maybe that there's that there is more than one way to solve a problem. I think that this, more than anything, really helps my children to be confident in their own skin and their own uniqueness. You know, they're more willing to try new things, and it gives them a greater understanding, I think, of the world around them.
Well, Monica, thank you so much for being on the show today. It was great to talk with you and learn more about your background.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Thanks. Thanks for listening today. You can find Monica at her blog, mommymaestra.com, or on Facebook and Instagram at Mommy Maestra, or she's on Twitter at Latin Mommy. You can find show notes for this and every other episode of The Global Mom Show at theglobalmom.com. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at The Global Mom Show and on Twitter at The Global Mom. If you'd like to find out ways to support the show, go to theglobalmom.com/support. You'll find a list of products you can buy that send a little commission to the show. You can also support the show by doing your regular shopping on Amazon. Just go to www.theglobalmom.com/Amazon. When you shop there, a portion of your purchase will go to The Global Mom Show. If you like this episode, please write a review in iTunes, share it with your friends, and let other people know about this community of moms who wants to raise children who see the world through eyes of understanding and compassion. Have a great week, and remember, you can live a global life wherever you are and teach your kids to do the same.